Let's learn to write video game dialogue. Oh, this says sequences. Well, that's because dialogue sequences are way more than just dialogue. The camera might move, the ground might collapse. Someone might hug you, or give you diamonds, or explode into flames, or dance across the moon, or blow up the moon. Anything can happen in a dialogue sequence because these are sequences involving dialogue, not dialogue-only sequences. This also allows us to include other kinds of sequences like cutscenes. Anytime you put the player into a passive observer role and show them something, that's a sequence. And internalizing that is going to be super helpful in learning to write for video games, in my opinion. I'm not here to tell you the right way to do things, or I have solved writing, here's the formula. No, I want to give you some super basic advice that probably very few people will disagree with. Super basic advice that you may have heard other places, but for video games, there are some unusual tilts, some unusual lenses that kind of screw up the normal advice that you might get for movies or books. So let's go ahead and go over it. The most basic advice that you're likely to get, no matter who you ask, is to know what you want from a scene, to block it out, to figure out what the key points are. For example, here's the villain. I'm the villain. Yeah, I'm going to do something bad to the player. I've got a halo because it's that kind of edgy game. And then down here you say, oh, I'm the hero. Oh, I'm going to fight you. I've got horns because it's an edgy game. And then here is my sword. And on the other hand, I've got another sword. And I look unhappy because it's an edgy game. So how does this scene work? How are you going to write the dialogue for this scene? It's their first meeting. Well, some indie devs will just start at the beginning. They'll be like, okay, well, what does the player say? And then what does the enemy say? And then vice versa, and back and forth. Oh, you villain. Oh, you hero. Generally speaking, this is going to involve creating a lot of wishy-washy, mumbling nonsense. It's going to be a stream of consciousness style writing if you're not careful. And some devs are very good at that. Some writers really nail that sort of feel. And if the game is built for that, it can really work. But for the most part, it's going to create pointless scenes that kind of ramble. And if there's one thing you don't need, it's rambling. That's why so many writers will be like, okay, well, I'm going to block out the scene. Then we're going to write the scene. Then we're going to go back and tighten it up. And then we're going to go back and tighten it up. And then we're going to send it off to an editor so they can tighten it up. And then we're going to get it back and we're going to tighten it up. Because all that flab is bad in a writing sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to want to figure out what the heart of this scene is. What does the player need from this scene? And in this case, we want to build the player's enmity with the evil angel or whatever. So we're going to have a scene in this where, the beat is that you get punched out by the angel. Ah, I'm going to punch you out, you sucker. And you're like, oh no, I got punched out by an angel. Ah. And there's my devil horns. One of them got snapped off. Oh no. That's the heart of the scene, right? It's a pretty good heart. That is something that will really help to establish the tone of the game and the arc of the story and who you are and your relationship with the villain. And we know that we need more than that, though. So we start to plan around that. We're like, okay, well, that's the heart of the scene. So we'll just take a picture of that and put it into our sketchbook, and we'll build the rest of the scene around that. Whether it's just all internally in our head or whether we write it down, whatever it is, we need to figure out how the scene is going to progress. We know the point of the scene, and we need to build up to it. So let's have a part where we do a close-up of the villain's steadily more angered face as he realizes that he just hates your guts and he's going to punch you out. And we're building it up. We're going to start to fill in the gaps. We're going to start to get the flow going. And this is going to be something that can flow fairly naturally if you have a hard time writing, because you understand these are the important bits, and then we establish how we get there and all that jazz. And they're also going to flow well for the player, because the player knows that these are the important inciting elements. These are the things that we're supposed to resonate with. This is the point of the scene, so we can follow it. But here is where the video game part rears its ugly head. Can you do this? Can you do this? Like, at all? Can they be put into the game? Is it possible? How much is it going to cost to do? Like, if this is a classic VN, for example, visual novel, this is 2 art pieces that you're going to have to draw or render separately from the rest of the game. Like, these are distinct, unique art pieces, bespoke art. And this is like 3 hours of effort, and this is like 12 hours of effort. And if it's a VN, well, you don't want to leave the same image up on the screen while the rest of the text is flowing by. So you're going to need some in-betweener panels, and this is 3 hours, and this is 3 hours, and then here's another 3 hours, and then, we got like, oh my God, this is going to be such an expensive scene. It's hugely expensive because of all of this bespoke art assets we're creating. Well, maybe that's good, and maybe it's not. You have to know what you want to spend your effort on. You've only got so much effort, right? And every time you spend more effort, you push the game back. So you want to make sure to spend that effort in places where it's going to matter. Now, the good news about this is that in a rough sense, the player understands how much effort you've put in, because the things that don't take much effort are things the player sees a lot. And the things that take a lot of effort are the things that the player almost never sees, and they're going to understand that that is rare and valuable and really important. So if the player plays the VN and they start to see all of these bespoke art assets, they're going to go, holy shit, this scene matters. This scene is critical. This scene, whew. Whereas the same scene in a game that is full of fighters, like, Street Fighter, let's have a cutscene where Chun-Li punches out Ken or something, it's going to be like, okay, yeah, fun scene, I like seeing Chun-Li kick ass. But they're not going to be like, they're going to be like, yeah, that happens every day. How expensive something is and how rare something is, usually pretty close to a 1-to-1 ratio. So by choosing where you want to put in your effort, you're also choosing what the player is going to pay attention to. Now that might be a little bit like something people disagree with, but to my mind, that's how it works. And it also helps me to figure out where to put all my effort. Like that scene where the player gets punched out by the villain, that scene is going to be critical. It's going to be the beginning of the entire arc of the game. That's going to set the stage for everything that happens in the game. And therefore, we probably should put in a whole bunch of effort. We probably should spend a lot of time on it. But let's talk about a different sort of situation. Let's say that we're building an RPG, and the player enters into Tutorial Town with their wooden sword and their shield, and they meet Old Man Mick Questgiver. And he's like, oh, welcome, young hero. And my son went out, and my grandson, great-grandson, something like that, went out into the woods, and the woods are full of wolves. Can you go rescue my grandson? It's the inciting bit, right? We're giving the hero their first taste of what it means to be a hero in this world. And we understand the whole arc already. We've planned out what this actually does in the long run. We know how the player is going to move through it. We know whether they manage to rescue the kid and all that sort of stuff. We understand whether this is like a hopeful upbeat or whether it's a downbeat where they find the kid has been slain and it's like a really depressing moment. We understand whether the player has a problem with seeking heroism for the wrong reasons or whatever. There's a lot of possible ways that we can make this arc go, and this is the first beat of that first part of the player's arc. So how important is it? It's not. We don't want to spend very much money here. This is the first little nibble, the first little taste. We don't want to delay the game so that we can make the old man cooler. So we think about how to do this scene, and our first thought is, what's the most expensive thing I can put in this scene? What's the most expensive thing I'm willing to put in this scene? Can I have the old man point and be like, yeah, my son, my grandson, my great-grandson, all of my sons, everybody, they went that way, and then move the camera and show like the scary woods over there, like a camera pan like this? How expensive would that be? For some games, that would be quite reasonable, not too expensive. And because it's something that's fairly rare, the player will be like, okay, that is the beating heart. That is what I'm supposed to be paying attention to. The dialogue that the man is saying, the old man is saying, is the body of the scene, but that's the beating heart, that expensive moment. Whatever the most expensive thing you've put into the scene is, That's the thing that you need to arrange the scene around, because that's your showcase. That's the one thing that has the most effort put into it, even if it's not very much effort for this particular scene, because it's a cheap scene. How about adding in a wolf howl? If the old man says, "Yeah, we got a problem with wolves. Can you go rescue my son?" And then you hear, "Oh," and the old man says, "Oh, yep, there's the wolves. I hope my son isn't dead. Hope they're not snacking on him." Putting in that added element, that wolf howl, probably pretty cheap. You've probably got wolf howls because you're going to encounter the wolves anyway, right? So at some point they have an audio howl and you can use it here with just a small distortion effect on it for distance. So that's also fairly cheap, but it can also be the center point. It's something where that would really help to bring our focus onto the situation. And whether we play that for laughs or whether we make that like pretty sinister is up to us. It's up to how we want to do it. But the point here is that whatever the most expensive beat we're willing to put into this scene is, we should arrange the rest of the scene to help amplify that, because that is the thing that the player is going to notice. That's what's going to drive the player's attention, in my opinion. Now, as for basic advice, that is what I recommend. I recommend that you plan your scene around the most expensive thing you're willing to put in it. But there is another part of this that is worth mentioning before we sign off for the day, and that is the difference between writing a movie and writing a video game. And the difference is that when you write a movie, you write the whole movie. When you write a video game, you normally don't. Aside from a few very, very specific situations like kinetic novels, you're usually only writing part of the video game, and then the rest of the video game happens because the player is actually playing it. Oh, I'm playing this video game. And that means that they don't have to have your sequences always being blared at them. They don't always need to have every moment of the game dictated to them. A lot of the game is going to happen in their own head as they're actively playing the part of the game that isn't a sequence. So you use your sequences to amplify and to contextualize and to guide, but the player is having a lot of goings-on outside your sequences. And if you learn to accept that and use it as use it as fuel or leverage it in your sequences, you'll find that to be very freeing. I find that a lot of devs overwrite their sequences, and by that I just mean they keep going, like a YouTube video. And that's not generally a very good idea. Like, you don't need to tell me that so-and-so then went home and ate porridge. I'll have control over the game. I'll be able to watch them go home and eat porridge. So when you're writing, the two things I try to keep in mind for video games is, one, there's actually a video game, and you don't need to block out the video game with your writing. You want the two to get along quite well. And the other is, there's a price attached to every sequence you make. How high is that price, and what are you spending it on? Because that's the showpiece. That's the centerpiece of this sequence. And 3, know what you want. I hope this helped. It's super basic stuff. If you disagree or, otherwise have comments about it, let me know. I'm interested to hear.